Corona Alert with Carrie Harrison, providing facts, not fear.
Carrie Harrison with you, and welcome to this town hall, this confabulation, this collective of smart people where we answer your questions now that you're shut in, locked down, quarantined. The whole soup, cat, and pizzas is under wraps, and many of us, after 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, are just going out of our minds. Others, like me, I'm happy. But then I have so much to do, it's terrible. But if I didn't have a dog, I probably would be really seriously on the edge. I'm a very rare exception, but because of that, I'm able to bring this to you today. I want to introduce to you John Sovec. He's a therapist in private practice at Pasadena, California, who works with clients on career transitions, goal setting, and motivation. He's the clinical consultant for the Life Group LA, which is an adjunct, let me try that one in English, shall I? Adjunct facility at Phillips Graduate Institute, say that 10 times fast, and a guest lecturer at Alliant University and USC School of Social Work. John is currently a member of the California Board of Behavioral Sciences. And what we're going to do today is talk about what your life is like during this lockdown, during this quarantine, during this stay at home, during this shutdown, and your concerns, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, what's right, what's normal, what's not, what are other people feeling. You can just watch, you can tweet, you can Twitch. We're streaming on every single platform right now simultaneously. So whatever way you want to communicate, including via Zoom, you can do that by phone. You can Zoom in a box. It's all good. We're here to take your questions for the next hour. John Sovec, by the way, is author of multiple publications. He speaks at conferences nationwide, maintains a private practice all along. He's a respected trainer and presenter at the corporate, educational, and nonprofit sectors with almost 30 years of experience, which means he's seen it all. John has designed professional training models and seminars for the Walt Disney Company, Paramount Studios, Pandemic Studios, which were not created just during this, I don't think, Electronic Arts, and Washington Mutual. It goes on and on and on. We'll stop it right there, and I want to welcome you, John Sovec.
Thank you so much. It's great to join you today, Carrie.
Glad to have you aboard. And here we are amidst nothing less than pandemic whoopee. The road ahead. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Where's the tunnel? I mean, that's kind of where people are starting. We now know that officially 20 million people have filed for unemployment. It's now up to 30, but we think that probably 60 million people have lost their jobs. Are they ever going to come back? What are people supposed to do? Alcohol sales have gone up 256%. So people that I know that are pretty stable are sitting at home getting tanked. I don't think they're necessarily the exceptions. I think there's a lot of stuff we're not seeing, but you're hearing some of it, John.
Well, a lot of what I'm hearing from clients right now is being lost in this uncertainty. It's not just hard enough being asked to shelter at home and to stay in place and to quarantine. It's also the idea that there's no certainty, there's no end date in sight, there's no specific, if you do this till this specific date, we will be through with this pandemic and this experience of COVID-19. And that's really unsettling for a lot of people.
So what is the average guy doing? He's at home, she's at home, she probably, maybe doesn't have work. I think people who do have work probably feel better. I know for me, I tried to get unemployment. Sorry, denied. Now, I'm not supposed to get denied, but I understand the state of California, which is where we're based, is overwhelmed. And at the time that I applied for unemployment, and I'm a gig worker, just like somebody who tap dances on tables or waits on tables or drives an Uber. We're not W-2 employees. We're also not necessarily 1099 employees. We're kind of the invisible workforce. I applied, and because at the time the state didn't recognize me as a human being, I got denied. I'm hopefully in for another round. I tried for a small business loan. I am not Wells Fargo. I am not Bank of America. I was not the first one in with a huge corporate account so that I could just call my personal banker and make sure that I got $500,000. I'm the regular guy here. Are you hearing a lot about that, John?
Yeah. And Carrie, I'm going to recognize you as a person, even if the state won't right now. You know,
That's why I have you here today.
there you go. And here's the thing that's difficult is people are all managing this in very unique ways. I have some people that I know that for them, the best way to manage their well-being is to just absolutely cocoon. So it is about a very small experience of life right now. It's having groceries delivered rather than going out. It's about staying on Netflix. It's about staying in a very cocoon, like almost like self-preservation state. And then I have other people that I know who are all about they've ripped up their yards and planted gardens so that they're going to have vegetables to feed the neighborhood, for the next 10 years. And they are busy Zooming every 30 minutes to try and stay connected with people. And so I think that the experience is absolutely unique for each person. And what that does in some cases is it makes it impossible to say that there is a right way to quarantine. And I know some of the people that I've been talking to recently are feeling that pressure. Is there a right way to do this? And what I say is what's the right way is going to be the way that provides you with the best health care, the best mental care. So you're looking at spirit, mind, heart, and body during this entire experience.
Facebook message here asking, I'm at home and I'm so lonely and I want to do something about it, if you know what I mean. I guess what that means is he wants to go out and hook up.
Okay. So yeah, it's a big thing right now. People who are on their own are having this great desire to just have a nice hookup and feel a body and feel good and have all of that wonderfulness that we get out of this. Here's the deal right now is that if you are hooking up with someone who is just a random hookup, you're basically putting yourself at risk for exposure to COVID-19 because you do not know their history and where they're at and what they're doing. So I would ask you to really consider that very strongly in making this decision. Now, I do know some people that what they're doing is they're creating what I would call like a circle of fuck buddies. And in this situation, what it is they're with people that maybe they've had sex with before and that they have all committed to only being with each other and that they are being hypervigilant and careful in the rest of their daily lives to manage exposure to the virus. So are there ways to do it? Absolutely. Would I suggest it's not a great idea to just go on an app and to hook up with a random person right now? I would, because I think you're putting yourself at risk.
It's kind of like John Sovec. I'm just going to make a pretty broad analogy. Speaking of broads, a whorehouse, let's say in Nevada, where there's a big outbreak of syphilis and gonorrhea and herpes, and running in without a condom and just have at it and let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. The odds are something is going to happen. Yeah. And, to your point, because I like this idea of kind of a closed circuit jerkitude or whatever there might be available, is I have a friend who's an investigative reporter and he's got one lung and I work with him safely, so at a distance. But if I go out and have the life of Riley and decide, well, I washed my hands, it's got to be okay, as right. One other guy told me, not that I was with, I'm not saying that, I'm saying one other guy who confessed to me that he was interfrasticating, that he was rumbusticating au flagrante, but he washed his hands. If I got it, I could then, let's say I were not presenting symptoms, I could then deliver it to my friend with one lung and he's curtains. So it really is about the public health. It's a social contract we have to wear our masks and behave. It's not because we're trying to be good kids. It's because it's life and death for maybe your grandmother.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing too, though, you used the word that your friend confessed to you. And I think it's unfortunate because these are very real feelings that people are having. So like the person who asked the question, it's a thing that a lot of us are going through. How do we connect? How do we find that feeling of intimacy and sexual connection? That it doesn't have to be a confession, But if we can have a more open dialogue about it, perhaps we can find ways to create safe environments so that people can feel that they can still feel that human touch and have that experience. I just think the idea, though, is we are, at least for myself, that all the choices I'm making for health care right now are not just for myself, but for the people I love in my direct family circle, but also in my community. I don't want your friend who has the one lung to somehow be exposed to something through an action that I took. And that's my personal decision. And I think us coming together as a community and making these decisions, and I'm going to call them wise mind decisions, where we're checking in with our wiser self versus that like sexual like monster that wants to come roaring out, that we can sit more comfortably with these decisions and really look at helping our community at large. If you look back at the history of the HIV pandemic, the way we started making change was by us being responsible for our community and looking at all of our community members and saying, hey, I want to be there for you and I want to help you through this. And that's where the change started happening. So if we can bring that sense of personal responsibility forward, we can create deeper connections and maybe come through the other side of this actually closer as a community.
I agree. I see, John Sovec, a lot of tighter friendships. Zoom has been an incredible gift. In the beginning, it seemed like, are you kidding? But, we're looking at each other as opposed to on the phone where it's just a voice while you're multitasking. I mean, try multitasking while you're on Zoom and not get busted, right?
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the case. We have a tweet here. This guy says, I'm drinking like I did in college, and my wife is on my back about it. Is it okay to drink like this until the pandemic is through?
Well, depends how long ago college was for you. But I want to offer this thought that drinking, drug use are ways that we manage feelings, but also avoid them. And are there things that you're feeling in this lockdown that maybe it would be a more powerful thing to try and share with your wife, share with a friend, share with a family member, to expose the fear and the anxiety rather than to mute it or try and shut it down with alcohol? There's a lot of conversation right now, especially people who are part of 12-step programs, that this is a really challenging time to manage those substance use energies. And so I encourage people, if you want to have a glass of wine or two with dinner, that's lovely. But the idea that you're talking about college drinking, which I picture as like binge drinking energy, that's pushing it. And also, how is that affecting your wife? And how is it affecting the rest of the family? So maybe instead of, when you hit that moment, it's like, well, there's nothing to do today, I'm just going to start drinking, pause for a moment and say like, wow, what am I feeling right now that I'm trying to manage with this substance? And who could I talk to about it? Whether it's my wife, a friend, a family member, or even a therapist. Let's look at that, the deeper stuff underneath the drinking.
It looks like we opened up a tiny little can of worms here. We have a Twitch, and I'm rotating the various social media platforms. This comes from Twitch. Is it okay to watch a lot of porn I can't read what that's some weird acronym, but is it okay to watch a lot of porn?
Okay, so let's look at this. I'm a very sex-positive therapist and a very sex-positive person. Let's qualify what a lot means. If you're watching occasionally and you're using it either to masturbate or entertain yourself, or you're doing it with your partner and you're looking at it together and using it as a way to initiate some sexual contact. Beautiful, powerful way to use porn. If you find that 11 o'clock at night, you are watching porn until 6 in the morning straight through, that's where a concern might come in. And one of the tools that I work with clients on that type of action is to ask yourself, in this moment where I'm about to dive into the porn wormhole, is there something else I would rather be doing? And by sometimes pausing and asking that little question, we're going to stop the automatic behavior, and maybe we're going to open up some other behavior, some other self-care tools that a person could put in place. once again, I think we need to watch, well, what the too much means. And once again, if it's interfering with your sense of self or it's interfering with your daily functioning, that's where we have some concerns.
All right. We're going to take a Zoom call in just a second as we rotate the various social media platforms. I'm just going to reintroduce you, John, because we had a momentary interruption thanks to Spectrum, the internet company. I don't mind saying that because I spend, I don't know how many hours a week screaming at them. And by the way, if your internet company is not giving you what you pay for, call them up and get credit for it. And try not to answer the phone while you're live because that is also considered quite rude. We were talking about multitasking while Zooming. So we're talking right now to John Sovec, a therapist in private practice in Pasadena, here in California, working with clients on career transitions, goal setting, and motivation. Works with Walt Disney Company, Paramount Studios, Electronic Arts, Washington Mutual, USC. He's the big deal, which is why we brought him on. We have a caller here. Keith, go ahead with your question, please.
Hello. Thank you for being here, John. I'm familiar with your work, and it's amazing. And you talked about motivation, and this is my question. So, what determines the moment when one would make a decision to step out into the disease or the greater risk of being present with other people? For social conscience. In other words, divide and conquer is it's starting to be talked about on a regular basis in terms of people's rights being individually affected while the rest of us are staying sheltered in place. So it's a scary thing to me. And so when does a movement happen, or does it happen? And for those of us that have gone through this before, do we quote, like, let them learn for themselves? Or do we impose an agitation? And how is one supposed to have a barometer to determine that? Because what's happening for me is I'm just ultimately getting hopeless in the long run. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot to your question. So let me dissect a little bit and answer it bit by bit. So one of the biggest things that I notice happening now, and often happens in times of intense social pressure, is this us and them mentality. And it's interesting because my question is there an us and them? And if there is right now, is it actually being put out there as a way to distract us from other things that we might be addressing? This us and them energy is a really powerful tool to weaken the power of us as individuals. And going back once again to our walk through the HIV community, at the beginning of the pandemic, there really was very little to no support from outside agencies. And where do we find our answers? By being powerful and supportive of each other. I remember part of my work then was simply visiting hospitals and holding the friends of people the hands of people who were dying because everyone was afraid to be with people who were HIV positive in a hospital setting. So right now, for me, it is about how do I make the strongest personal decisions that have meaning for me and meaning for me as a member of my community? Can I take on every person out there and convince them of the rightness of my actions versus the rightness of theirs? I can't. And oftentimes when we try and have these deeper conversations with people or convince them of stuff, we tend to meet on a very mind-brain level. I'm going to tell you my facts. They're right. No, I'm going to tell you my facts. They're right. And it turns into this fight that's simply by us trying to convince each other in our brains. And what I suggest oftentimes is if we want to let people know, we need to connect on an emotional level. The feelings we're having, the things that are happening to us, and what those fears are. So part of our fear might be this idea that I want to keep myself, safer at home and to take health guidelines because my fear is that I'm going to pass it on to someone else, as Carrie was mentioning earlier. A fear of a person who's walking out into the community with no precautions at all might be a fear that's based on that their life is somehow become meaningless or that they are losing the power of themselves as a person. So if we can connect on what those feelings are, that's the potential where we can have conversations that might make change. And so that's an energy that I lean into very strongly. And I think it could be a powerful approach. For myself, it is about knowing that there are people that I love in my world, and I want to make sure that I'm keeping not just myself safe, but them safe as well. And that's my emotional core as I'm walking through this experience.
Excellent, excellent. We're talking to John Sovec. He is a world-class therapist. I don't say that, but Walt Disney Company does, and so do a lot of other companies where he coaches and provides real guidance as to how to get from A to B, and that's where we all are today. How do I get to B? And I don't even know what B is. That leads us to a Facebook message. This is a lady in Miami who lost her husband to COVID-19 and was not allowed to be in the hospital when he died. And so she's grieving alone, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, this is a really difficult thing. Because of hospital policies right now, oftentimes people who are getting ill are not allowed to have any types of visitors. And I'm hearing a lot of conversations people are having their last messages with loved ones over the phone, over Zoom, as they watch that person passing away. And that's a really, really difficult thing to process. Grief in any situation is really challenging. But when we have these barriers to being able to connect with, to love that person who's dying, it makes it even more challenging. For this woman, I would really suggest it would be a very important time to reach out to get some professional care and some professional help, because there are a lot of feelings that are coming up right now. And even if it's something as simple as like seeing if there is a support group online in your area that could help you with grieving, or having some one-on-one conversation with a therapist, I think it could be really important. For anyone out there, we are going through an intense grieving process right now on so many levels. We're grieving the loss of our personal freedoms. We're grieving the loss of people dying. We're grieving the loss of a feeling of basic safety in our communities. And we need to understand that right now as a way to ease up on ourselves a little bit and understand why these deep emotional feelings keep overwhelming us. And for a lot of people, also understand this may be affecting why you're not sleeping through the night or having really vivid and intense dreams. It's all this leftover emotional energy that's having to find a way to be processed in your body and mind.
Carrie Harrison with you. We are taking your tweets. We're taking your Facebook messages, your YouTube comments, whatever it's called for Twitch, your Twitches, and all these other things. We're talking to John Sovec. He is in Los Angeles, so well known, as well as around the country, for his expertise in handling and coaching mental health. We have a tweet here from a nurse in Iowa who says that she doesn't have enough masks and just PPE kits, and she's terrified. And how is she supposed to cope with this? I know that's not exactly an emotional question, though part of it is.
So first of all, I send absolute amazing gratitude and blessings out to her for doing this frontline work. As a mental health provider, I am out there doing frontline work as well, and it's really intense and it's really overwhelming. And there are moments when I know for myself, I just kind of have that I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it's even harder when we find that we don't have the support of the world around us, not having, the proper type of protective gear. And what I would just suggest in this moment is understanding why each of us as healing people, caregivers, stepped into this profession. And it's not that we have to do it, it's that for a lot of us, we've chosen to do it. And what I would suggest is just find the pieces of equipment that you can to keep yourself safe. And if you don't feel safe, it is okay. And this is really hard for us caregiver people to say this. It is okay sometimes to say that I can't do it and I can't follow through on it. And that is one of the hardest things for anyone in any of the caring professions, is to sometimes step back and put our self-care and our needs ahead of our clients and patients.
Thank you. Here's a YouTube comment. It's kind of long, so I'm going to synthesize it. Our civil rights have been taken away. It doesn't look like they're coming back. Even with the virus out there, shouldn't we go out and fight for whatever we have left?
So, it's really interesting. If you remember earlier on, I talked about this us and them mentality. And this idea of creating black and white thinking about there's one way or there's my way or the highway can be a really dangerous thing for any of us to sit in. And what I would suggest is our rights haven't been taken away, they've been altered. And what we might need to do as individuals is understanding what that alteration is and how it affects or influences our place in our community. There's a type of therapy called Adlerian therapy. And in it, the idea is that we are healthiest when we are connected into a circle of friends, family, and community. And so right now, this idea that we're in lockdown or our civil rights are altering makes us feel like we are unplugged from that bigger picture that a lot of us crave and feel like we should be involved in. And what I suggest is find the places where you are still connected and understand that as part of your commitment to your well-being. So once again, not that things have been taken away, that they've been altered, and they're being altered for a very powerful reason right now. And we, at least for myself, and once again, I want to speak from that place of the I am making these choices because I am very connected to my community and I care about the well-being of that community on a very basic health level.
Here's one from Twitter Periscope. How can I trust the president anymore after what we're seeing every day?
So I want to go back again, and this is partially because I've had experience of living and working through a pandemic in the past. And this has to do with the HIV crisis once again. What we looked at there was we had a period of the first 4 years of the pandemic, the HIV pandemic, where the government wouldn't even say the words HIV or AIDS out loud. 4 years in, Ronald Reagan finally spoke the words out loud after the death of Rock Hudson. So this idea that somehow we are supposed to depend on these outside agencies to be the ones that fix everything for us, I think is a shift that we might want to look at for ourselves. Once again, ideas of community and connection. I'm a baker. I love to bake. Right now I'm baking a lot because it's part of my management of my emotional self. If I ate all of that, I would probably be putting on a lot of weight, ruining my blood sugar, and getting unhealthy. So when I bake, what do? I find ways to deliver to neighbors. I find ways to deliver to friends. We did a really cool birthday thing for a friend the other day where I delivered to their porch and then went back to the car and they got their birthday cake. So rather than depending on these outside agencies to be the things that make our change, let's find ways to bring it down to a community level, which we know from past experience is one of the most powerful ways that we can manage our own well-being.
Thank you for that, John Sovec. Last night, I was talking to a dear friend about this emotional constipation that we all have. Like, well, what am I supposed to do down here, this little lone mosquito buzzing around in a massive room? You know, what power do I have? What sphere of influence do I have? We saw earlier, just in this broadcast, the internet went out for a moment, and that all this power, poof, gone, flattened, just like that. And he had a really good point. And so, you know, I was thinking, well, the only thing we've got is our creativity and the fact that we can be the solution or we can do nothing. If we do jack shit, it just gets worse. It just piles higher and deeper. And part of being, I guess, a good citizen or a responsible grown-up is that, you know, we're smart. A lot of us are pretty smart and creative. We can invent our way out of this thing. And even if the new normal is the way it is right now, it's just sort of an alteration of it, we're going to have to invent stuff. Example, 100 years ago, 90% of Americans were entrepreneurs. Today, only 10%. 90% are relying on corporations and factories, but all of that may be changing. It may be, from now on, a work-at-home environment. You know, you wonder, are corporations going to want to pay for a second home. And when I say that, we don't think about when you commute, I'm going to commute to go to work,
Right.
to be in my second home that they're paying for. And then they're giving me coffee and a salary, and I gossip and I get lunch, and they're going to pay for my broken leg. Companies have now learned they don't have to do that anymore.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are probably not going to want to restore that. So now what? And I know you can't augur the future. I can't either. But faced with that dilemma, a lot of people, as you so rightly said, John Sovec, they cocoon. I want to do the same thing. Just get under the covers and wake me in about 10 years when it's all over.
Right.
But that doesn't really work.
But Carrie, here's the thing. I will let you cocoon for a day, maybe 2 days. But eventually we do have to open the curtains and look out and see the world around us. There are a lot of people that are talking about this time as like caterpillars and butterflies. And it's really fascinating. People use that metaphor. They look at the idea that the caterpillar builds this cocoon around it, and then how many days or weeks later, it comes out as this beautiful butterfly. But here's the thing people forget. While the caterpillar is in that cocoon, it actually completely disintegrates down into this goo. And then that goo reforms into the butterfly. And so we need to make space for us to be okay with that moment of being in the goo. Some days we're not going to be able to do stuff. Some days we're going to get out and we're going to want to change the world. But it is okay to be in that goo when we have to be in it. And I think that's a really important metaphor for people to look at in this idea of trying to do the perfect quarantine or be the perfect citizen at this moment.
Thank you, John Sovec. It's very much like that face tube. How do you like that? They're all turning into one, and they will if Zuckerberg has his way. That Facebook message from earlier about the person boozing like they're in college, and you think about it in California, and I think in other states too. Liquor stores are essential businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had to make that decision, right?
Right.
So here's one from Twitter Periscope again. And the person wants to know, because I guess we've been talking about HIV and other things, is being gay normal? Such a 1980s question, I guess.
Well, for me, absolutely. That's such a powerful and interesting question, because once again, we're looking at these questions of what is normal. And because I was born as a queer man, it's absolutely a part of the fabric of who I am. Because I live in a community that has LGBTQ identified people, absolutely, it's a part of the fabric of who we are. And the thing that I always suggest is if we just look around the friends, family, and world that we live in, almost all of us know someone who is part of the LGBT community. So to me, that means that we are who we are. I do not need to prove my value to anyone as being a queer man. And I don't think anyone in our community is required to prove that they're okay, they're normal, and they have valuable assets to bring to the world. We are absolutely beautiful. I love the idea, rainbow of people who are loving and kind and adventurous and sexual and intimate and creative. And to know that that is a beautiful, powerful part of who we are, and that there is not a single person in this world that doesn't have someone in their life that they know or love who is a part of the LGBT community.
Wow, well put. And I'm going to second that. Imagine if, let's just say you, who I'm talking to, not John, but you're a straight guy. Do you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to like girls today? I am, because it's a choice. I'm going to choose today. I'm going to like girls. Or maybe a girl gets naked. I am going to get a boner. I am. So, you don't think about it, ever. And it's the same for any of the variations, the permutations of sexual orientation. People don't, make a decision. Today, I'm going to be gay so I can take a lead pipe to my head because, I'm kind of bored. I don't think so. We can look at historical figures. Alexander the Great, who conquered all of the known world, traveled with his boyfriend. Yes, he had a wife. Yes, he had kids, but he had a male companion, famously. The Emperor Hadrian with an H, who had probably the longest peacetime history in the entire Roman Empire of 50 years, built all of the libraries that we know today, bibliotheques. This was his invention, and art and music and all the rest of it. His boyfriend, Antinous, he built a gate in front of Zeus's temple. Zeus, the god of all gods. Remember, where we get the word God or Deus, Deuteronomy, comes from Zeus, Zeus, Deus. It all comes from Zeus, the god of gods, the father of all fathers. In front of his temple in Athens is Hadrian's Gate, which is a temple to his boyfriend, Antinous. And there it is, right in front of Zeus's temple. Are the Greeks out there chiseling it down, throwing hand grenades at it, marching around? No way, because it's part of human nature, as it always was for the ancient Greeks, as it always has been throughout human history. Only until, I think, the late 1800s, and John, you could speak to this, when Sigmund Freud and the New York Times, within 30 years of each other, started to use the word homosexual. It then became a thing that you could label, you could categorize it, you could make it illegal officially, rather than just this vague sodomy, which, by the way, is also boy-girl blowjobs. So, a lot to be learned. I think it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. And this is a no-holds-barred.
Powerful. I think it's powerful that both of us have actually thought about this pretty deeply.
Right?
Well, the other thing too, that if you think about this, if I say to someone that I'm gay, usually the first definition that goes through their mind is they think about the idea, oh, you sleep with men. And that is just a small portion of who I am as a gay man. The essence of who I am has developed over years of living in society differently, of having experiences of coming out, of having moments of creating connection on deeper levels. There's a lot of power in the experience of being a queer identified person. That part of the journey is we learn so much about ourselves. So I'm honored to be an LGBTQ person in this particular lifetime. And I think it's been a powerful and opening journey for me as a spirit on this earth.
And to finish off that conversation, the Native Americans had a word, berdach, B-E-R-D-A-C-H, might even be French, might be the French translating it, the way we have pho, P-H-O. Berdach were twin spirits, and many Native Americans, whether they're first, I forget what the Canadians call them, but same idea. The original inhabitants of these various countries all seemed to, without necessarily communicating with each other, no phones back then, they all came to the same conclusion that these people have twin spirits. They're fully male, they're fully female, and then there's sort of which makes a third gender or a twin spirit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm gonna put this in, but I hope we can get back to our conversation about COVID after this. I also put in the idea that if you look around the world in cultures everywhere, LGBTQ identities have existed for thousands and thousands of years in all kinds of different cultural stories. And there's power to recognize that we are not just something modern that got labeled, but that our energies have been a powerful part of the history and creation of the human story and history and definition of how humans have created themselves on this journey on Earth. So let's not forget that we have been around for thousands of years in multiple myriad cultural stories.
Thank you. And thank you, John, for indulging me on going along on that. But the reason I do that is I am not convinced that people get it. Sure, there's Will and Grace, there's this, there's that, it's on all the TV, but I'm not convinced that the majority of Americans actually think it's a natural phenomenon. I think they think that somebody makes a bad choice. So I give it a little extra leg room I don't see on airplanes in the discussion, because otherwise we just assume that they're all on board we're just kind of, making it clear. No, they don't get it. They don't get it. They didn't wake up like that. It's not even on the a tick box of options. And if they're not having that option, how could anybody else? So I think we've offered at least a little bit of glimpse into some human schooling here. Let's go back to COVID as you recommend. Here we have a Facebook question here wanting to know, it's a guy, his girlfriend does not want to have sex with him, and that's basically all they can do anymore. He doesn't want to force her, obviously, but he says it's a fine line. How do I handle it?
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of people define their relationships by the sexual activity they're having in that relationship. And each of us has a very different level of sexual need, desire, even feeling good about ourselves in the process of having sex. So perhaps the check-in is more about what are the multiple levels of needs that you in relationship may need to address with each other. Are we searching for a little bit more intimacy? Are we looking for ideas of how do we connect and chat about life processes? Maybe we're looking at underlying conversations that are coming up in this quarantine situation of frustrations of needs not being met in certain ways. So perhaps the idea, rather than saying, honey, I want to have sex, would be a check-in, honey, how are you doing? And in that how are you doing section, perhaps intimacy develops, deeper connections happen, and then the next time you have sex, there's this beautiful, deeper level of care and kindness that shows up with it. And that energy can be really hot in the bedroom. So perhaps, rather than just look at the physical act, look at all the myriad parts of who this person is and try and support them there, and then see what that does.
Here's a question from Twitter Periscope. I have lupus and I'm immunocompromised. Contactless pizza delivery and all this other quote unquote contactless everything, I don't think it's true. Not really a question.
I'm not sure what they're asking in that moment.
I'm not sure either. It's more of a comment. I guess really the gist of it is you've seen commercials. Our pizza is contactless. I don't know what that means either, but I guess it means they haven't groped the pizza. Except the delivery guy is groping the box. So really it's more a question of proper prophylaxis. Like on the receiving side, just because somebody says it's contactless, should you dispense with the mask and gloves?
Well, and I think as you described that, part of the deeper question is that someone who is immunocompromised, you have to take higher precautions. You don't really have an option in it because it does become a life or death issue for you. So I hear the concern and the care and maybe the mistrust of this label of contactlessness. And it's absolutely valid in understanding that in those situations, you have to take an extremely high level of caution because you are an at-risk population. And this goes back to why we as citizens should be doing protective measures so that we are taking care of those who have bigger challenges.
Here's one from YouTube. I am so depressed, I can barely deal with anything at all. When is this going to let up? It's not an answerable question necessarily.
So, yeah, and that is one of the reasons why there's high levels of anxiety and depression right now, is because no one can answer that question. And that's a tough place to be in. I would definitely for this person suggest if the depression feels too overwhelming, please absolutely reach out. There are national suicide hotlines that if that feels like that becomes something that's tempting or an answer for you, that you can get support and talk to someone who will first of all help you through that moment, but also connect you to local community resources that you can still access from your home to have support to try and manage some of this depression. Some other really basic tools to manage deep depression right now are simple things like doing some connection to family and friends. Rhythmic exercise. This is such a fascinating thing. They've studied for years that in managing both depression and anxiety, that it's not just about, you hear oftentimes, well, just get out and do exercise. It's not actually that. It's often about rhythmic exercise, something like running or biking or walking on a treadmill or being on a stationary bike. Even dancing, just putting on some music and dancing around your living room helps the body to actually release calming chemicals and find a much better state for yourself. So if there's a way that you could potentially bring that into your experience, that might be just a simple step to try and manage the depression. But once again, as I said earlier, if it feels overwhelming, I would definitely encourage you to reach out.
Here's a Facebook one. I'm not sure if it's real or not, but this guy says, I've developed kink, I guess, sexual kinkiness, since this thing started, and his partner is not interested.
Mm-hmm. So once again, we're going back to a very similar question about the gentleman who's worried about his wife not wanting to have sex. In these moments, we're spending a lot of time together, and stuff is getting uncovered that maybe we haven't shared with partners in the past. Anyone who's stepping into the kink community, you really need to make sure that you and your partner are both on board with those conversations, that each of you is understanding what it might look like, what it might mean to you, what you might enjoy together. And that conversation is one of the foundations of any type of kink connection. Deep communication, so you can all both try things that are different for you, but to try them safely. And it is really vital that both partners have to be on board for kink to work effectively. And so I would encourage you to maybe do a little bit more conversation with your partner, maybe go online and help them understand some of the things you might like to do and understand what their feelings are about it, and see if you can find a place where you compromise and bring a healthy sexual energy into your bedroom.
Wow. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Billions on Showtime. Mm-hmm. Have you seen it before, John?
Yeah.
Yes. So, these high-powered guys need the ball gag and the wife to dress up in leather and whip them, and dominatrixes and all that. And this is just a personal question, because I don't have kink. I do have one kink, one fetish. You must be clean. Take a shower. But so I don't fully understand it. But is there some insight into what compels people to take pleasure from humiliation or pain? Or maybe I just see it as humiliation and pain. They see it as something entirely different.
Well, the conversation about kink is a deep conversation. We could have a whole conversation just about the kink world. But if you think about it, it's a way to absolutely let go of having to be in control of a moment or a situation. And that letting go of control can only be created by deep levels of consent and communication. But there's something really empowering about this idea that somebody else is completely in charge of a moment. You have absolutely no responsibilities whatsoever. And that can be really exciting for some people if they've got a lot of pressure and responsibility. And once again, the connection is these deep levels of consent and communication. On a TV show like that, what do they show? They show the most salacious versions of it. But to actually have an experience like that with a trained dominatrix, you're going to have a really intense conversation about what's going to happen under the aspects of their visit. So it's not just something where all of a sudden you take this equipment and you do this. There's a really powerful and exciting way to step into this world.
I love it. Okay, well, that opens up a door of opportunity for me. It's a small door, but at least we know it's there. We have a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. And I want to thank you and just reintroduce you. John Sovec, therapist, private practice in Pasadena, California, who works with clients on career transitions, goal setting, motivation, guest lecturer at Alliant University at USC School of Social Work, and a member of the California Board of Behavioral Sciences, works with Disney, Paramount, and a bunch of other big companies to help guide employees and whole systems into better functioning, which is why we have him on today. This is a Facebook question, and it goes back to something we were talking about earlier. Is there it's a comment, not a question, but basically this guy sees a similarity between how HIV appeared and rolled out and was responded to COVID. It feels similar to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we were mentioning earlier, there are those similarities there. Once again, a very mixed and unresponsive government action towards HIV coming into the community. We're experiencing that now, lots of confusion, lots of mixed messages, lack of scientific information. There are a lot of parallels there. And I'm finding for a lot of people that I talk to who lived through that, there's actually a form of PTSD that they're experiencing currently because it all feels so familiar. And there was so much death that people experience on a personal level during the heyday, the highest periods of the HIV and AIDS crisis.
And then we'll just finish with one more. What can I do to, not everyone writes in complete sentences, I'll put it that way. What can I do to make the best use of this time I have alone? I have nothing to do.
Okay. So I actually have a really powerful technique that I use personally, and I've been sharing with a lot of my clients, and they've had great results with it. So right now, a lot of people are feeling an energy of, there's so much stuff I should be doing. I should learn how to bake sourdough bread because 25 people have posted it on their Facebook. I should learn a new language. I should learn to play the guitar. I should read through my entire library. And what I invite people to do is to get rid of the should energy and instead invite a could energy into their life. Now, the way this works is I actually have a could list at my own house right now. And it's a list of all the things that I could do. Everything from planting lavender into the front yard, to baking a new dessert, to reaching out to certain people, to writing letters, to grooming the dog, to washing the floor or doing laundry. And this could list is something that I have out and visible. So when we get to these moments where we're really overwhelmed by depression or anxiety, our minds can't think of what could I do, what could I do? But by having this could list down, we can look at it and in that moment decide for ourselves, no, can't do that, don't want to walk the dog, don't want to plant lavender. Oh, an online yoga class sounds really good right now. And suddenly our brains are triggered into something that we could do because we're choosing to in that moment. And I'm finding this is a really powerful tool that a lot of people are having great results with as a way to manage their emotional well-being during this experience.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, John Sovec, for coming on. I'm just going to give the final bio here. You're a therapist in private practice in Pasadena, California, working with clients on career transitions, goal setting, and motivation. Your work has been featured on The Ricky Lake Show, OWN, Oprah's channel, Bravo, Fox, The Advocate, with broad topics, regular columns for the Huffington Post, and Good Therapy. You're an adjunct faculty at Phillips Graduate Institute, guest lecturer at Alliant University, USC School of Social Work, and the Life Group LA, which is where I've gotten to know you from through them. And I just want to thank you so much for extending yourself today for a bunch of people who you don't know, but they now know you. And that makes a much better community.
And if they'd like to learn more about me, they can visit my website, which is www.johnsovec.com.
And that's SOVEC, johnsovec.com.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll be doing more of these as this special long-form Corona Alert. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Harrison. Learn more at coronaalert.org.